Welcome back to the morning show here on the Rise News. I'm Adesua Omoran.
I'm Rafai Sini.
And I'm Sheito. I think I must feel weird to be here for another extra hour.
Well, barely 24 hours after Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari ordered the police to arrest the killers of a woman leader of the People's Democratic Party in Kogi State, north central of the country, Salome Abu, the State Police Command has announced the arrest of 6 suspects in connection with the murder. Abu was killed by thugs suspected to be members of the All Progressives Congress on November 18, 2 days after the governorship election in that state, which the APC won. The spokesperson for the command, William Aya, a deputy superintendent of police, said the suspects were brought in on Friday. Now, according to him, the police has started interrogating the suspects to ascertain their level of culpability, and the outcome of the investigation will be made public as soon as it is completed. President Buhari had on Sunday demanded a thorough investigation of the murder of the woman leader. Guys, while we wait to change our conversation this morning, this story is making the headlines. Was the president's call timely? A lot of people had given him the knocks for congratulating the winner of that election without even mentioning or talking about the violence that greeted those elections. You remember he received Governor Yahaya Bello, who's the governor and governor-elect of Kogi State, and the national chairman of the party, Adams Oshiomhole, also refers to the governor as President Muhammadu Buhari's baby boy. Oh no, that's the Bayelsa governor. But you know, all of this happened.
Well, one is baby boy, one is baby boy,
one is baby.
And then, you know, nothing was really said about this violence that greeted these elections. But for some, they say whenever you wake up is when your money begins. The president's call might not have been timely, but he has made that call. Now 6 suspects have been arrested.
No. So the president has not made the call of the violence in the election. He just talked about the specific dastardly act of criminality. I mean, he's not made that call. So let us separate it from him. Maybe when he makes the call, I mean, let's not forget that a president in this country had, you know, the oomph to be able to come out to say that the elections that brought me into power were fraught with irregularities. Until tomorrow,
President Musa
Yar'Adua, we still respect him for what he has said. So until the president comes out to say, okay, you know what, yeah, you won, baby boy won, but you need to check violence before the elections. But speaking about this act, this is a criminal act that we need to see the end of. And not just to arrest the suspects and investigate, we need to see the end. And I keep making a note to ask. Cases like Evans, the kidnappers case, we don't hear of those cases again. It looks as though everybody has forgotten it.
Yeah.
We need to follow this to a logical conclusion. People need to be prosecuted. We need to see them face the full wrath of the law.
Yeah.
This is a criminal act, devoid of election. A woman that was sick, that stayed in the house because she was sick, and you burnt her in ill health.
But would it take elections and politics out of it? It did have the underpinnings of politics in it.
It was a reprisal after the elections, as it were. It had the underpinnings of politics.
Yes.
But it was a reprisal, and let's not forget, she wasn't the original target. She didn't go foment the trouble. Somebody else fomented the trouble, and she was sort of caught in the crossfire. Yes,
from the press release of her husband, it was very detailed that she wasn't. She just was caught in the web and was ill, resting at home.
I mean, and they, like you were saying, and they, of course, burned the house. She was inside. I mean, it's a very dark and gory story. I think one of the reasons why it's also making the rounds is because she, you know, her and her husband were very strong PDP supporters, and of course, because of the timing as well. I do hope that the police can investigate this and make sure that they get to the crux of the issue, because we do have people that have taken advantage of the election violence to kind of amount certain judgments, or, you know, in this case, actually killing a woman, to make sure that this is the issue on ground, and they, you know, investigate it at the very least. And then they've also spoken about 6 people who have, 6 suspects who have been arrested. Like you said, it's not just about stopping here, it's about making sure that somebody goes to jail for this.
Yeah.
You know, it beats my imagination, and it has been said over and over again. These foot soldiers who go out to carry out this violence, whether electoral violence or not during elections, do they see, you know, their leaders? Their leaders don't do this dirty job. Their leaders shake hands, attend the same parties, drink from the same bottles. But you see, these foot soldiers carry out this dastardly act, all in the name of politics, all in the name of, elections. But I think that, we do not say enough. You cannot risk your life or the lives of others just because a politician is paying you peanuts or is asking you to do so.
I think the problem at this is mixed messages. Those politicians shake hands in public, and the next thing they go to their supporters and tell them, kill them all. There was a video circulating in Kogi State, I've not been able to verify, about a certain political party chanting a song, and the end of the song was back, 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 back.
Wow.
Gun ringing out if the party doesn't win. So it's a case of mixed messaging. You say something, you do something else.
Okay, so let's now change our conversation. From cybersecurity, which you discussed this morning, to Lagos traffic. Let's change the conversation. President Muhammadu Buhari recently took a swipe at federal lawmakers on the issue of constituency projects and their impacts. Well, at the opening of a national summit on diminishing corruption in the public sector, the president stated that 1 trillion naira appropriated for constituency projects in the last 10 years can hardly be seen.
The president's remark has generated reactions from both chambers. While the House of Representatives discussed the president's allegation at plenary yesterday in Abuja, the Senate claimed ignorance of it, saying that the president is yet to communicate his concerns about the matter to the Red Chamber.
At the center of all these allegations is the Independent Corrupt Practice and Other Related Offences Commission, ICPC, whose publication is believed to have triggered the remark by President Muhammadu Buhari. So joining us now from our Abuja studio for a discussion on constituency project allegations is Rasheedat Okoduwa, Director of Public Enlightenment and Department and Spokesperson of the ICPC. But before we get started, let's see a report by our State House correspondent, Eghosa Igunbor. We'll be right back.
Available data shows an annual release of 100 billion naira for zonal intervention projects across the country. But at the moment, the money released does not measure up with the current realities at the grassroots.
Corruption generally, and public sector corruption in particular, inhibits the ability of government to deliver infrastructure and basic services to the people. That is why I have reiterated on many occasions that corruption is an existential threat to Nigeria.
This sad narrative led to the introduction of a systematic tracking of the implementation of these projects. The opening of the National Summit on Diminishing Corruption sees the launch of the first report of the Constituency Projects Tracking Group.
This summit, therefore, presents the opportunity to reevaluate the effectiveness of these strategies, put in place, and where necessary, develop new strategies to bolster our common resolve to rid the public sector of corrupt practices.
The report from the last 10 months shows corrupt tendencies from projects embedded in the budget by government agencies and ministries without the capacity to deliver or supervise them to completion. Further breakdown of the yearly allocations shows that over 3% of these funds are at risk of being embezzled.
Most notorious in this regard are the Border Communities Development Agency and the Small and Medium Enterprises Development Agency. Duplication of contracts with the same description, narrative, amount, location, awarded by the same MDA in order to bring the amount allocated within the approval threshold of the executing agency, or just to spend money that has been allocated to the sponsor of the project.
Lawmakers were also not spared in the mismanagement.
Some project sponsors refused to show project size to the contractors in cases where the contract was not awarded to their preferred company, while in others, constituency projects were cited on private property of project sponsor without transferring title to the community.
The ICPC proffers some solutions to check these practices.
We want to humbly recommend, sir, that MDAs must not be given projects that are not related to their mandate. Secondly, project sponsors should not be allowed to select the implementing agency. Government should decide the agencies that are approved to implement projects for transparency and accountability and for effective supervision of value for money.
President Buhari has, however, asked the National Assembly and the judiciary to embrace and support the creation of special crimes courts to address corruption cases.
I seize this opportunity to call for intensification of collaboration between anti-corruption agencies, the legislature, the judiciary, developmental partners, civil society organizations, and professional bodies. The fight against corruption is, of course, not only for government and anti-corruption agencies alone.
High point of the event was the Integrity Award presented to Bashir Abubakar of the Nigeria Customs Service for rejecting a bribe of 150 million naira offered by drug traffickers, and Josephine Ugu of the Federal Airport Authority, who had at different times returned missing monies found at the nation's airports. Eghosa Igunbor, Arise News.
All right, so joining us now for Director, Public Enlightenment and Spokesperson ICPC. Let's just go straight to the conversation now. It's a joy to talk to you, and thank you so much for coming around to talk to us. Explain, what are the findings of this your report as regards Constituency Projects? A lot of the lawmakers came out to say that they don't even know how the money is disbursed, or the money is not even disbursed completely in some cases. But you have some very shocking findings. Can you just, inundate us with the findings, please?
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Yes, it is true that the monies are not given to the lawmakers. It is also true that where appropriated, maybe not the total appropriation is released. That is true. But I've heard, like I said somewhere else yesterday, I've heard a former House of Reps member say that releases sometimes have been as high as 70%. And we are talking of a bulk sum, aggregate sum appropriated of about, say, 100 billion naira. And say 70% or even 50% of that, is released in the course of the year. We're talking minimum of 500 million, for the year, minimum. Now, yes, it's not given to the lawmakers, it's disbursed through the MDAs, but then when we conducted this tracking, we discovered that even though the money is not given to the legislators, directly, they tend to have a hand in how the money is utilized. For example, when the MDAs are awarding contracts, the sponsors, who are the legislators, sponsors of the constituency projects, those who had recommended constituency projects for implementation, they influence the contracting process in a manner that sabotages the intent of the constituency project. Ordinarily, procurement processes are supposed to comply with the proper planning. Whoever will be awarded the contract should exhibit professional competence, financial wherewithal to be able to do it, and so on and so forth. On the surface, it will appear as if all of these have been complied with. But from our findings, we find that it's usually the recommended contractor from the sponsor that usually gets this. We have seen where the sponsors own these contracting companies. From documents from CAC, for example, we have seen that they are the directors or their relations, their spouses, their children, or it could very well be their personal aides that are executing these contracts. But moving beyond ownership of those contracting companies, what else did we find? We found majorly in almost all the cases, first, these projects did not have proper planning at the beginning. No synergy between the implementing MDA and the sponsors. And you wonder, when something is not properly planned, how it's going to be very well executed in the first instance. We even have an MDA who had written to a ministry to say, we do not want constituency projects inserted in our budgets anymore. What we found is that constituency projects are simply inserted
Madam
into the
Rasheedat,
budgets of MDAs.
I hate to interrupt your line of thought, but we have to go on a quick commercial break, and we'll be back to talk some more about your findings on constituency projects. Please stay with us. Welcome back, everyone. You're still watching the morning show here on the Rise News. We're still talking about the controversial constituency project by federal lawmakers. And we have in our Abuja studios Rasheedat Okoduwa, who is the Director of Public Enlightenment Department and Spokesperson for the ICPC, an anti-graft agency in Nigeria. Thank you so much, ma'am, for staying with us. Before that break, we are talking about some of the findings in this your report. It's the first phase of your tracking scheme or project. I wonder what was the most shocking for you? There's been a lot of reactions by the lawmakers, as expected, I'm sure. But they raised a couple of allegations as well. They say, for instance, your sample size is not far-reaching. You did 12 states, 422 projects, thereabout. But my question to you really is, from what you have seen so far and what you are discovering, would you definitively say that constituency projects are a conduit for corruption? And would you recommend that they be scrapped?
Okay, let me take the two questions, one after the other. First, would I say it's a conduit for
corruption? Okay, let me. I was asking you, with the findings so far, do you think that this is a conduit for corrupt practices by federal lawmakers, and would you be recommended that they be scrapped? And I'll also ask you what was the most shocking for you in these findings.
Well, let me clarify something. We did not say it's a conduit for corruption by lawmakers. That would appear as if one is targeting lawmakers. By whomever. It is, we find that the whole processes around the implementation of the constituency projects, the processes are not standardized. They do not follow. For example, I said earlier on, they are not properly planned ab initio. The contracting process is interfered with. The implementation, from what we found, even though we tracked 424 projects and we physically visited about 370 of them, and we found that maybe 255 were completed, but not completed to satisfaction, to specification. That's what, furthermore, that our finding established, that these projects were not properly executed. So all of the lapses we observed definitely showed that the way we are running constituency projects now does not make for optimal use of the monies appropriated and released for constituency projects. There are too many lapses, too much influence bearing on the processes. We found that the MDAs are overburdened. For example, an MDA that has a capacity for his own core mandate of maybe a 1 billion naira has been given to him for his own core mandate. We have constituency projects amounting to over 5 billion for it to execute. How does it have the capacity to execute a 5 billion naira, aggregate number of projects, when its own capacity is limited maybe by staff size or by functions and funding size? So these are the issues. So it's a conduit for corruption for whomever wants to exploit the lapses, the gaps, the vulnerabilities in the process. That's number one. Number two, you had asked whether constituency projects should be scrapped. No, not at all. We simply need to rework. We simply need to redo the framework around implementations. Constituency projects are, the whole concept is noble, is laudable, because we want development to reach the grassroots. And it's one of the ways for it to reach the grassroots if it's properly executed and the execution monitored. In actual fact, ICPC is embarking on a campaign now for citizens to own the process themselves, to own constituency projects, because it is government's own input into their own development. And they have to follow it up. They have to make sure it is done. They have to make sure the projects are not vandalized at the end of the day. So ICPC is still very much in support of constituency projects. We simply need to rework the fundamentals around how it's implemented. Thirdly, I think your third question, what did you say about it? Whether
what's the most shocking? What's the most shocking revelation so far?
Oh, the most shocking. Okay, well, I guess we've seen quite a bit working in ICPC, but I guess for us, first of all, when we find that things monies that are meant to empower the grassroots are not distributed to them, and they have been acquired, they have been procured, and you have for years, they are not distributed to the grassroots. You wonder why such is being done when you find that so many number of items, tricycles in their hundreds, grinding machines in their hundreds, kept away somewhere, or you find that something that is meant for communities are now being put to personal use by the sponsors. In the case of Bauchi, for example, we found a situation where tractors meant for farming cooperatives in that state were cornered by the sponsor, used on his farm for, I think, since 2016, until we did this exercise. So that is quite shocking, that the only way sponsors of projects can actually say they have impacted the grassroots is when they monitor themselves and they ensure that these things reach the grassroots. In fact, it adds to their political capital when they ensure that these things are done the way it's supposed to be done. So when you find, or for example, we also found something a bit fluid that has a lot of money devoted to it, capacity building and empowerment. When they buy items or they say it's capacity building, there's no way of really tracking, for accountability's sake, whether these things were actually done when you are doing a post-implementation tracking. And you find it, consuming a huge amount of the allocation. This year, 2019, the appropriation for zonal intervention projects, that's what they are called in the budget, zonal intervention projects. The appropriation is 100 billion. Out of 100 billion, 35 billion, more than a third, is devoted to empowerment and capacity building, which is not easy to track. So ICPC is advocating very seriously for a reduction in the quantum of capacity development and empowerment projects that we'll be spending our money on. We should see more tangible physical things on the ground. We should see hospitals, we should see schools, we should see rural electrification, we should see roads being built. These are things that are easy to track for value and for implementation to specifics. So these are what we are advocating. So we think that we should go ahead with constituency projects, but we have to go rethink the whole framework.
Okay, Mrs. Rasheedat, I want to bring your attention to a statement that was made by the chairman of the ICPC, where he said the intention of this investigation was to complete the projects as initiated, to return the funds, or face prosecution. I want to find out from you, or clarify that. Is it one or the other, or are we going to be getting all of this? If we have culprits or sponsors who have not finished their project, are they giving room to go back and finish it and return this, or would they be going straight to prosecution? I also want to ask about phase 2 of this. The first phase started in April and it ended in September 2019. Do you plan on expanding? Like Adesuwa mentioned, there are 12. You only did 12 states for phase 1. Are you expanding? And how do you plan to execute phase 2 of this investigation?
Okay, as regards our findings and whether we are going to prosecute or recover money, it depends on the situation. When we see that a project was not done to standard, or maybe someone was supposed to build maybe a school and furnish the school, and the school is built, but the furnishing is not done, then we ask for the person to return the value of the furnishing to government, or go ahead and do the furnishing. But when we find very bad cases of collusion, very, very criminal cases of collusion, we shall not hesitate to prosecute such offenders, not at all. But by and large, when we find that they comply with our directives, for example, we have recovered a lot of money. We have recovered close to 1 billion naira, direct cash and asset recoveries from this exercise. Well over 700 million we have recovered. We have enforced the distribution of items that were hitherto, hidden away by sponsors, to go and distribute them. We supervise the distribution. When we find sponsors complying with these directives, we would probably not prosecute. But where we have very bad cases of collusion, criminal cases, definitely we are going to have to do something about it. Regarding whether how we're proceeding further, we are going into a second phase of the exercise, and that has already started in terms of planning towards it. We had a retreat about a week and a half ago, reviewing what we did for the first phase, and then, learning from the lessons that we garnered over the period we did it, and then using it to inform our framework for execution for the second phase. That second phase is going to, of course, encompass more states than we did before. Now, you talked about sample size. We said ab initio, this is phase 1. We only covered 12 states, and we could not possibly have covered all of the projects. When you are doing research, you just do sample size. You don't, and if somebody says sample of a third of a whole is too low for us to arrive at certain conclusions, I think that person would have to rethink their statistics and all that. Because I think a sample of 1/3 is big enough for us to be able to arrive at certain conclusions, albeit maybe not reflecting the whole field. Now, the second phase, we expect to see more vigorous tracking. We expect to see more enforcement now because everybody's on the notice. To let you know how much everybody's on the notice, when we started this phase, we actually had contractors who returned to site on the projects that we were tracking on our instruction. 34 contractors returned to site. But interestingly, 200 other contractors who were not dealing with the projects that we were handling, but because they heard ICPC was monitoring, ICPC was tracking, they returned to site in 200 projects that were not even part of our sample size. These are monies that would have been looted, and nobody would have remembered them if we didn't get on this tracking. So those 200 have returned back to site to deliver to Nigerians what they were supposed to deliver, quality, social delivery service to Nigerians. Oh. Now, going forward, as I've said, we will see more vigorous tracking. We will see more enforcement because, as I said, everybody's on the notice now. It's for everybody to put their house in order, all around, especially the implementing MDAs, and to resist as much pressure from anywhere. It doesn't have to be the sponsors. There could be other intervening variables that is not necessarily allied to the sponsors. It may not really have. But wherever pressure is coming from, MDAs who are implementing agencies must resist, because at the end of the day, the ball stops on their table. The buck stops on their table, because we would have to say, you implemented, then let us see how you did the implementation. If it's not all right, then the person will have to, answer for it. Okay. So these are the issues.
Okay, we'll go to a quick break now. We'll come back and talk more. But I just want you to prepare your mind for this. I want us to talk along the lines of conflict of interest. As you said, some of the companies that executed those projects were still lawmakers. That's very, very debilitating in a democracy like this, for you to have issues like that. If we're ready for a break, if we can cue into a break, we'll go to a quick break and we'll come back and talk more about that. All right, you're still watching the morning show on Arise TV, and we're having a very important conversation about constituency projects, and we've got Rasheedat Okoduwa, Director of Public Enlightenment, ICPC. I did post a question before we went on that break about conflict of interest, because that's a very sad one, but it looks as though it's become a norm in Nigeria. I mean, what's your take on this? And are there very strict penalties for this?
What do you say is norm in public office?
Conflict of interest.
Can you repeat it? Yeah.
People using their own companies to run government projects.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you very much. I'm very happy you're bringing this to the table now. It is, like you said, more or less a norm, but it is very wrong. It's criminal. The ICPC Act, that is the Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Act 2000, at section 12 of that law, it says it prohibits using one's office, having an interest in a contract that is given by one's office. And if one is found guilty of that offense, the person is looking at 7 years imprisonment. We have taken quite a number of persons to court over this kind of issue. Conflict of interest is something that is even embedded in the Code of Conduct for Public Officers. It's the very first provision of that Code of Conduct for Public Officers embedded in the Constitution. But sadly, very many public officers do either, they simply ignore that provision and do what we have just said. Well, if they do it, an ICPC is called to investigate, and we find that you are culpable, the person is looking at 7 years upon conviction. Section 19 of the ICPC law also forbids using your position to confer undue advantage on yourself, your associates, or relations. If somebody is found guilty of that offense, the person is looking at 5 years imprisonment maximum. So conflict of interest is prohibited in the law, and public officers are advised to comply with the provisions of extant laws and regulations in the public space.
Okay, you did say that there are those who feel like they were targeted, and especially the federal lawmakers who have been reacting to this report so far. And so let me ask you, at the state level, what is the ICPC doing? Are you also tracking funds budgeted and spent by local government authorities and even the state government, or is that not under your purview?
Okay, let me answer the first question. We are not targeting lawmakers. We are not targeting anybody. To say targeting somebody is like something that is unjustified or a witch hunt. No. What we are looking at are processes that facilitate corruption. And in that, looking at the processes, when we find people who have gone against the law, then we move against them for going against the law, knowingly. Procurement law, the Public Procurement Act is there. It's been there since 2007. People are supposed to follow the dictates of the law, provisions of the law. So what ICPC is doing is looking at processes and procedures and making sure that people comply. Of course, in the process, if we find those who have done something criminal, we'll move against them. Now, whether we will go to the states, whether states are under our jurisdiction, very much so. The ICPC Act covers the entire federation. That is something that has been settled judicially as far back as 2002, when the Supreme Court had determined that this act, Corrupt Practice and Other Related Offences Act 2000, was made constitutionally, and it covers the entire federation. Because Ondo State had taken ICPC to court in 2001 because ICPC moved against Ondo State in certain regard. So it's settled. We cover the entire country. Whether we are moving to the states or the local government, that will come in due course of time.
Okay, so I would like to, you had mentioned earlier an awareness program being put together by the ICPC called My Constituency, My Project. Can you shed some more light on this awareness program as it applies to the second phase of this investigation?
Oh, very good question. Thank you very much. On Thursday this week, that is the 28th of November, ICPC is launching a national awareness campaign in collaboration with the National Orientation Agency to reach all the grassroots on ownership of constituency projects. It is tagged My Constituency, My Project. For citizens, first of all, to know that government is making input into their development. There is a lot of misconception about the constituency project. Many people at the grassroots believe that it is the sponsors of this project, that is lawmakers, who recommend the project. The people at the grassroots believe the sponsors are using their own funds for the project. And you find the sponsors tagging projects, maybe empowerment projects, or when they are distributing empowerment, grinding machine given by lawmakers, so and so. Or they put up they buy a vehicle and they say it is lawmakers, so and so. It is not so. We want grassroots people to understand that constituency projects are funded by government, by federal government, as a direct input into grassroots development so that we can attain the sustainable development goals. ICPC is interested in the achievement of quality service delivery to the grassroots. Projects that have macro impact on the grassroots, health projects, water, education, roads, electrification. These are projects that are worthy if they are implemented properly. So this awareness campaign will first of all let the citizens know government is the one funding, and it's because government cares about them. A lot of people will say, oh, government is not reaching our place. We are not feeling this government. They should feel the government if the constituency projects are implemented properly. Secondly, we want them also to know that they can call ICPC on 0800, that is 0800 2255 4272. When they call us on that number,
can you please call that number again, ma'am?
Their allocation, their appropriation for their constituency for year 2019, so they can track by themselves. We'll tell them the project, we will tell them the amount, and then they can track when the money is released, and then track the implementation of the project. And then when the project is delivered, they can take ownership and then monitor the use of the project so that it's not vandalized by those who are not patriotic minded.
Thank you so much.
So we are going to have the awareness at all our state levels, throughout the states.
Okay.
Following this national launch on Thursday.
Okay, please,
we
can you...
are going to have
can you just quickly...
appearances on TV and radio talking about this awareness.
Okay, please, can you just...
we encourage citizens to report to ICPC when they notice any funny business going on about the projects, whether it's not being done according to specification and so on and so forth. They can report those infractions.
Okay, real quickly, as we wrap up, just call the number again, the ICPC number. A lot of people want to get that number. Call the ICPC number again, maybe 2 or 3 times as we wrap up. The number again.
Okay, all right. It's a smart number, so don't think the numbers are too long. It is 0800 2255 4272. 0800 2255 4272.
Thank you very much. We really do appreciate your time on the show this morning, and we're glad to be a part of your sensitization whenever you begin it. Thank you very much again for coming on the morning show here on the Rise News.